said to me, God in German is good and good is good. And then I realized that God in English is God and good is good. And the etymology for God was once, it came from the word good. And if I think about it, if God once meant simply good and it was just about doing good and it was trying to get people to do good with all their actions, when did that message get lost? Why has it been so?
I think it comes down to the free will that God has bestowed upon us. You see, the free will allows us to either obey God or disobey God. So obviously God has already given us all these rules to follow and all the conditions to follow. But then we also have the choice to not follow, to be disobedient, to follow somebody else other than God Almighty. And that is, I think, probably the reason. So even though people might say that they're religious and might be preaching a lot, but when it comes to practice, it's completely different. You see, it takes a lot of willpower to put into practice many things that it's very easy to preach. Because to speak is quite easy, but like they say that your actions speak louder than words. So that is something which most people notice, including yourself, when you were mentioning about a certain imam or whoever that was. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a common practice, I think, which I would say is kind of universal. So even if you don't need to be religious to understand that, isn't it? So even an atheist, I don't think atheists out there are all bad in terms of there are many atheists who have good characters, yeah, who might be honest and sincere. But then that doesn't mean that there aren't atheists who are the opposite of that. So yeah, actions speak louder than words in all cases, regardless of your belief.
I had a discussion, I think I don't know when it was, but so another question, I guess a question. Yeah. Religion often talks about chosen ones and chosen groups and saying if you believe in this, you'll come up to heaven, you'll be saved.
They're exclusive. All religions are exclusive.
It's very exclusive. Yeah. Now, atheists, like you said, often have a lot of good in there. There's a lot of atheists in the world who will go out and their whole purpose is to try and do good. Yeah. And they will do everything in the meaning of being good. Now, they might not believe in a certain religion. For an example, let's take Christianity for an example. They might have an understanding of Christianity about how the fact has been walked throughout history, and it's not quite accurate, and it's not actually 100% what it should. It's not giving the message of exactly what it should be saying, because things have been taken out, and so for one reason or not, they might choose to kind of say, no, I'm not going to believe in it because it's not complete, or I don't quite understand it. Yeah. But they do understand to be good.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, it's something universal. You don't need to tell someone not to kill, yes, because they know to kill is wrong. This is something intrinsic in human beings, yes, to be good. But then, like I said, depending on your environment you live in, depending on the people you associate with, depending on the many other factors, yes. And I personally believe there are other factors like Satan as well who influence this, or maybe the money you have, the amount of money you have can corrupt you as well. So lots of factors play a role in your community. So if your father is someone who is a saint and he's led all his life in good works and charity and so, it's not necessarily that the son of that father who is a saint is automatically a saint. You see, it depends on many factors which I just mentioned. So there are a lot of things, and that's why I believe that something like religion, it keeps you rooted in those moralities, which I think the atheists don't have a basis for. So the atheists might think these things, not to kill, not to steal, is good. So this is something that is universal, and I believe you don't need a religion to understand those things. But there are many other things where you have to understand, unless you have like some sort of objective morality, yes, there won't be any consequences for you. So say for example, I don't know, someone might say that what is wrong in me stealing from someone, this garment who basically stole it from my father or something, you know. They just kind of make up some sort of justification for stealing.
That's what it is. It's just
you see what I mean?
Justification for stealing.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure even
as human beings we can do this, you know, we can't just make up things.
But that's it. I think as humans, that's a lot of what we do. We make a lot of justifications for things we know that isn't necessarily always true or quite 100% accurate. I mean, we know, like you say, I think everyone knows the basics. Everyone knows. But you see, in religion it's a bit different. I'll tell you why. Because in religion there's consequence. Yes. So maybe for an atheist they believe that after we die, that's it. That's the end. You see what I mean? There's no consequence.
So someone like Hitler, yeah, who might be an atheist and who might kill millions of people, if he can get away with it, he will get away with it and say, okay, I'm going to do this and get away with it, and there's no...
millions in the name of religion.
Yeah, that's wrong as well. Absolutely. I'm not saying, look, I'm not saying just because they are religious or just because they are atheists. Yes, as far as I'm concerned, the end result is you kill innocent people. Whether you call yourself a Muslim, like the ISIS and all, who claiming, or like the KKK or the Crusades, who claim to be Christians. At the end of the day, if you're going to kill innocent people without justification of any sort, yes, just to basically, they might have some justification from their angle, obviously, but that's obvious. Anyone can see that killing innocent human beings is wrong, but they do not see that because they try to justify it by hook or by crook. So in case of people who claim whatever they claim, yes, if they are religious, many of them, they know that there is going to be consequence, and because of this consequence, they're going to not commit that crime which they would have committed if there was no consequence.
I guess my point was that a lot of people use religion as a justification for committing the crime, and it could be stated so clearly within the religion that it's wrong. However, they will find something within the religion and a justification to make it sound right and to make it say, I am doing this on behalf of my religion.
Yeah.
And
it could be any ideology. It doesn't have to be religion.
Yeah,
it could be communism who don't believe in a religion.
100%.
It could be any ideology. But you see, what I'm saying is that when a religious book...
I guess, do those people not see the consequences, my point? So the people who will do those acts in the name of religion, do they not see the same consequence of going to heaven? Because surely they must still understand that they have committed a
because
sin.
They have justified to themselves that what they're doing is correct. You see what I mean? That's why they don't see the consequence. So from their perspective, they see that this, what they're doing, is correct. Yes, like for example, burning someone in a cage or something, yes, which is, to us, it would be something unthinkable, gruesome, an act. So even if that prisoner was someone who was a criminal or something, to burn them alive, yes, it's completely horrendous. But the way they justify it is that, oh, look, these guys are raining bombs on us, that is kind of burning, so that's how they justify it. But when you actually take them to the text, yes, which they claim or they allegedly follow, yes, over there it clearly says you should not even burn bodies which have been lying in a battlefield. That means the ones that have already died. You do not mutilate them. Now this is the law for people who are dead. Can you imagine the law for people who are alive? So the right of a prisoner, the right of people who are under your authority, this is something taken very seriously in Islam. So the rights of everyone, regardless of what position they are, is something well defined in the Sharia. But that's the reason we call these the fringe groups. Yes, so they are not someone who represent the mainstream body of Muslims and Islam. However, there are certain things. I mean, how I normally judge a religion is based on the scripture. So if the scripture says something, then you cannot get away from it. Because ultimately, if you believe that scripture is from God, then you have no one else other than your God to blame for that, if there is something which is morally wrong. For example, I do not believe that it is morally right to kill an innocent being, yes, and I do not believe that salvation is only through human sacrifice, which I believe is the case in the case of Christianity, because they believe that without this crucifixion, there is no salvation.
Yes. See, and this is kind of another issue. I guess at the beginning, I say,
and that's the reason. That's why I don't want to go into blaming people, because we can have lots of examples of people doing X, Y, and Z. We'll be, you know, for forever.
Like as Christianity goes, it's a thing of the Bible teaches one like. The Bible teaches, and it's funny to me because Christians seem to get a different message from what I got from the Bible. Like, Jesus never walked around and said, I am the Son of God.
Oh, God.
You know what I'm saying? or that I am God.
Yes, absolutely.
You know? Yeah. Jesus, like, the first commandment is that there is one God.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how I can then go and misconstrue the message and say, oh, Jesus is God, and that I must worship Jesus as God?
Yeah, you want to give one to this gentleman as well?
Oh, no, I'm okay.
You sure?
I don't drink coffee.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Thank you, honestly. Thank you very much.
But what is your view with regards to the salvation only through crucifixion? What do you make of that?
It's to the description that Christians give of Jesus. I don't think he would have died on the cross as a first one.
Why?
Because there is many historical writings of people being crucified. Like it was a common way of punishment of people being crucified and survived.
Yeah.
Now, if Jesus was a divine being, as people would like to tell me, this divine being wouldn't be killed by something that a lot of other people would have survived. That's the first thing. Okay. I believe there's a lot of scripture, a lot of text taken away out of the Bible that speak about Jesus and his life. Speak about how he actually died, speak about a lot of the things, because it would contradict the message that institutions want to give. So would you reject this notion of salvation through crucifixion of an innocent man? He didn't salvage anything, because the fact is people still commit sin.
Yeah.
He didn't take everyone's sin away from them, because people still are born after him and will still sin.
Yeah.
So the idea that you can believe that Jesus is God and that you are annulled from all sin is completely ludicrous.
So what is your belief in terms of salvation? Do you believe there's such a thing as salvation?
I guess I do, but I guess my thing is I probably don't know what it means properly.
Okay, salvation, I mean, from the brief definition I can give, is basically you being saved. In other words, in the case of the Abrahamic faith, it's like you attain paradise eventually, and that is you being saved on the day of judgment from the punishment, which will be the case for those who have disobeyed God and who have rejected God, for example.
So I guess salvation is the point of where you reach heaven. That for me, if that's the understanding. Salvation is the point where I have gone through purgatory and I've ended that period.
But that's the question.
And if there was anything else, I've gone through that and I've ended that and have finally reached and I finally gained
paradise. Yeah.
Paradise. Now for me, what is that paradise? Paradise is...
No. The question is not what is paradise. Okay. The question is how will you reach paradise?
How will I reach it?
What is the conditions or criteria for you to reach salvation? Yeah.
To be able to
attain salvation. Sorry.
My thing of how to.
Can you put that in the back, please? Thank you.
If I could, so my personal thing, if I could end my life happy with everything I did, like happy with all the consequences that my life had on earth, I would be happy. Like if I was content with saying, in all situations, I tried my best to do the good thing.
But how would you know something is good?
Like you said, we all have a natural inclination of what is good.
Those are for the main things like murder and stuff like that. But there are many things in your life which many people it's subjective, isn't it? Good and bad.
It's very subjective.
Everyone defines good as...
It's about one's own intention. One's own intention for me is everything, isn't it? God can only judge you from your intention.
So let me ask you this. Somebody in the Nazi army, their intention was to follow the leader and they believed the leader was right. Yes? And they believed that everything that he was doing was justified. Would you consider them their intention?
I couldn't hate a Nazi soldier. I don't hate a Nazi soldier.
No, it's not about hating. It's about what it's about.
I don't condemn him. I don't think God would condemn him necessarily, because if that is the environment that he is put in, and if
why would you not condemn someone who's oppressing other people?
Because the belief, from my understanding, is that the people that he thought he had to oppress were the bad people. And if within his environment there have been a group identified as the bad people, because within our environment there are bad people. We have groups that we identify.
You see, you have actually answered my question. Remember I told you about good and bad being subjective? Yes? So in other words, you're telling me that as long as their intention was good, yes, even though the consequence of what they were doing, as far as you and I were concerned, was oppressive. You see what I mean? So this is something...
for an example, if anyone had an inclination that what they were doing was bad and continued to go on and do so just because it was the right... the right thing to do, just because it was what everyone else was doing, that is wrong. I don't believe in following a crowd.
But that's exactly what someone when says, I'm following the leader. I was following orders.
See, then that's the difference. Following what you think is right and following orders,
Yeah.
very different.
But that's the question I asked you about the Nazi soldier.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
And that's what I'm saying. It depends on the Nazi soldier.
So if you're saying
was he
you
following what he believed was right? Did he really believe that what the leader was telling him was the right thing? Or was he just doing it because that is the leader and I must follow him to be able to maintain my way of life?
No, but if you have convinced yourself, yes, like it could be, yeah, okay. So if you convince yourself, if you are a Nazi soldier and you convince yourself what you're doing is right, so you're saying that even though the consequences of what they were doing was horrendous,
I don't think
he'll still be justified?
I don't think, no, because then what you said is convincing yourself. Convincing yourself is like giving yourself justification.
Yeah.
I'm more talking about others convincing you.
But I was talking about the intention. You said if the intention is right, then you shouldn't blame them. Isn't that what you said?
100%.
Yeah. So even if the intention was right, remember, once you convince yourself, now your intention is going to be right. Because you have already convinced yourself that what you're doing is justified.
I don't. It's funny.
That's why I said it's subjective, good and bad.
I get what you mean, but I don't think anyone can truly convince themselves of something that they don't think is right.
Okay, let me give you an example. Today, most of the people think drone strikes, and this is about, they have done a survey, and they say that 67% of people would rather have a drone strike rather than an army going and taking out the enemy or something like that, because of the low consequences for the soldiers. Yes, I mean, sorry, in terms of the there's no human casualties as far as
on their own side.
Yes, on their side. Many of the governments today, they have no problem whatsoever to send drones to countries which are sovereign. Yes, like for example Pakistan and Afghanistan even. These are sovereign nations. They have their own their own parliament. They have their own system of governance and so on, and they are not under some sort of military rule or something. But then it is okay for people like